Simone stood up in the middle of the fellowship hall, in front of the whole homecoming committee, and set a shiny ring of new kitchen keys down on the counter between us, like she was laying down a winning hand of cards. "No offense, Mama," she said, loud enough that the folding chairs went quiet. "But homecoming's too big now for a home cook." I was standing at the prep counter with both my hands resting on my mother's old cast-iron pan and the fat spiral notebook I have carried to every homecoming for more years than Simone has been alive. I did not drop my chin. I did not raise my voice in the house of the Lord. I just looked at that ring of keys catching the light, then at my daughter-in-law in her sharp cream blazer, then at 11 grown church members, suddenly finding something very interesting about their own shoes. My name is Loretta Bishop. I am 66 years old. I have been a widow for 9 years, and I live in Stone Mountain, Georgia. And they all thought, every last one of them, that they were only replacing a cook. What not a single soul in that room understood was that everything about homecoming lived inside my head, and in 31 years I had never once written a word of it down. But I am getting ahead of the story. Let me set it down slow, in the order it happened, so you can see it plain. Before I carry you into all of it, I want to know where in this wide world you are sitting tonight, and what the hour is on your clock. Put it down in the comments for me, your tone and your kitchen and the time, because I read every single one, and it comforts me to know who is keeping me company while I talk. And do one small thing for me while you are down there. If anybody has ever looked at the work you do quiet, the work nobody sees, and called it just a little hobby, type the word Amen so I know I am not sitting here talking to an empty hall. Because my grandmother used to say a thing under her breath while she wrung out a dish towel, and it made no sense to me until I was an old woman myself. She would say the walls a house leans on are never the ones people stand around admiring. It is the plain ones nobody notices that hold the whole roof up. So pour yourself something warm, get yourself comfortable, and stay close with me. Because this is the whole story of the Sunday 400 plates of food came apart in real time, and the same people who voted me out of my own kitchen had to walk across that hall and beg me to come save it. I need to take you back to the beginning, because you have to understand what homecoming even is before you can understand what they threw away. Our church sits on a rise of red Georgia clay, a brick sanctuary with a white steeple and a fellowship hall built onto the back in 1968, the year my own mother helped lay the tile in that kitchen. Homecoming is the one Sunday every fall when everybody comes back. The children who moved off to Atlanta and Charlotte and clear to California come home. The old members in wheelchairs, their grandbabies wheel them up the ramp. Folks baptized in that sanctuary 60 years back come sit in the pew their name is practically worn into. And after service, every one of them files down into that fellowship hall and eats. 400 plates, fried chicken and baked chicken and smothered chicken. Collard greens cooked down with smoked turkey. Candied yams. Macaroni that has to be baked, not the soft kind. Cornbread and rolls both. Peach cobbler and sweet potato pie, and a red velvet cake Miss Verna has made every year since Nixon was president. And here is the thing nobody outside that kitchen ever thought about. All of that food, 400 hot plates, has to land on the table at the same minute. Not warm. Hot, the greens still steaming, the chicken crust still crisp, the rolls just out. You cannot cook 400 plates at once. That kitchen has 4 ovens, and there is a secret about those ovens I will get to directly, because it matters more than anything else in this whole story. For 31 years, the woman who made all of that land hot together was me. I did not do it with a clipboard. There was no big paper chart taped to the wall. I did it just how my mother did it before me, and her mother before her. which is that I carried it. All of it. In my head. Understand what I mean by that? Because Simone never did, and it cost her everything. I knew that the hams, back when we still did hams, had to be ordered from Mr. Odom, the butcher out on Route 12, by the first Saturday in August, because he only cut so many, and the Baptists on the other side of the mountain put their order in early. I knew Mr. Odom would hold 4 for me on my word alone, no deposit, because I have been buying from his daddy and then from him for 4 decades. And one time when his wife was sick, I brought a pan of food to their door every evening for a week and never said a thing about it to a living soul. That is not on any list. That lives in me. I need to tell you how the kitchen came to live in me in the first place, because it did not start with me. And it was never supposed to end with me either. My grandmother, Willie Mae, was the homecoming cook before my mother. She could barely read, and she never wrote a recipe down in her life, because in her day, a black woman's knowledge was the one thing that was hers. The one thing no family she cleaned for could take off her at the end of a workday. So she kept it close, in her hands and her head, and passed it mouth to ear, mother to daughter, standing at a stove. That is how a people who owned nothing kept the one thing they could own. My mother, Delphine, took it from Willie Mae, and I took it from Delphine, on a kitchen stool, from the time I was 5. She would put her hand over my hand on the spoon and say the times and temperatures out loud like a song, over and over, until they were in me so deep I could not have gotten them out if I tried. "Why don't you write it down, Mama?" I asked her once, when I was maybe 10. "So you don't forget." "Baby, I am not going to forget," she said, not even looking up from the pot, "and neither are you. You want to know why? Because I am not putting it on a piece of paper you can lose. I am putting it in you, where it can't be lost, and can't be stole, and can't be burned up in a fire. My mother put it in me the same way, standing right here. This is how we have always kept what's ours. In us. You hear me?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "Say it back." And I said it back, the whole order of it, the butter and the buttermilk and the screaming hot iron, and she nodded, and we went on cooking. She never once tested me on paper. She tested me by pulling me off that stool one Sunday when I was 17 years old. "You do it today," she said, untying her own apron and handing it to me. "All of it. I'm going to go sit myself down out there like a regular member." "Mama, by myself? For homecoming?" I was terrified. "What if I get it wrong?" "Then 400 people will know," she said. "So, don't get it wrong." And she kissed my forehead, and she walked out of that kitchen and sat down in the hall and let me run the whole homecoming at 17. And it came out right. Every plate hot. And when the last one went up, I found her face across that crowded hall, and she did not smile at me. She just nodded once, slow. That one nod was worth more to me than any diploma anybody has ever hung on any wall. So when Simone said the kitchen was too big for a home cook, she did not know she was calling 3 generations of women a hobby. She could not have known, because none of it was written down for her to read. But that is exactly the point. That it was never written down was not proof it was small. It was proof of how it had to be carried, by people who were not allowed to own anything but what they could hold inside themselves. Simone comes from that same line and never knew it. Because the world had told her only the written thing is real. I knew which of the young mothers could be trusted with the cornbread, and which one would open the oven door 40 times and let all the heat out. I knew Brother Elias means well but cannot be near the fryer, because he will not respect hot grease. I knew the exact order the ovens have to come up, and I knew the thing about the breaker. So, here is the thing about the breaker, because you are going to need it. That kitchen was wired in 1968 and patched a dozen times since, but the bones are old. 4 ovens along the back wall, and if you turn on 3 of them at once, all 3 pulling for heat together, the breaker in the gray metal box by the mop closet trips and kills the power to the whole kitchen. Every time, without fail. The fix is simple as breathing once you know it. You bring the ovens up one at a time, letting each one get to temperature and hold before you ever reach for the next dial. Never run 3 cold ovens at once. Do it in order, patient. And that kitchen feeds 400 people hot. Rush it like a restaurant, and you are standing in a dark kitchen with a raw bird and 400 hungry souls out in the hall. I have known that breaker for 40 years. Known it like you know the trick step on your own back porch. It is not written on any wall. There is no little sign taped up. It lives in me, and until this year, that was enough. Because I was always the one at those dials. And I have not even told you the hardest part of running that kitchen, which is not the ovens and is not the meat. It is the people. So let me sit you down and tell you about the 3 circles, because they are going to matter enormously before this is done. There are, and have been for as long as anybody can remember, 3 groups of women who cook at our church, and they do not entirely get along. There is Cordelia's circle. Cordelia Hargrove is 70 now, and she cooks vegetables like her hands were made by God for that one purpose, and the women under her would follow her off a cliff. Then there is Mavis's circle. Deaconess Mavis Turnipseed does the sweets and the sides, and she is proud, and she has not cared for Cordelia since a Sunday in 1994 when a compliment was paid to one of them at a repast that the other felt should have been hers, and 40 years has not undone it. And then there is the old guard, Miss Verna and the founding families, keepers of the cakes and the breads and how things have always been done, who look down their noses a touch at both the other circles. 3 circles. 2 of them not speaking, all of them proud. All of them in one kitchen the size of a 2-car garage, 400 plates, 45 minutes, once a year, on the most important Sunday there is. The real reason homecoming worked for 31 years was not my brown butter. It was that I was the one person all 3 circles trusted. Cordelia trusts me because I sat with her through 2 funerals. Mavis trusts me because when her grandson got in trouble, I drove to the county lockup with her at 2 in the morning and never breathed a word of it. Miss Verna trusts me because in all these years I have never tried to change her red velvet. So on homecoming, I stand in the physical middle of that kitchen, Cordelia at the window on my left, Mavis at the pantry on my right, and every order flows through me. Cordelia never has to ask Mavis for a thing, because she asks me. I am the hinge all 3 of those doors swing on, and nobody ever walks into a house and admires a hinge. But take the hinge out, and watch how the door hangs. Simone looked at that kitchen and saw a bunch of church ladies who needed organizing. What was actually there was a 40-year-old peace treaty that one person's presence held in place. And you cannot vote a peace treaty onto a contractor. One example, so you know it is not a small claim I am making. 3 homecomings back. The church's big freezer quit on the Friday night, and 30 pounds of chicken started to thaw and turn. Nobody knew but me, because I am the one who checks that freezer Friday night, same as my mother checked it before me. I never called the committee. I got on the telephone at 10 o'clock at night, and I called a man I know who runs a soul food place off the highway. Ray, I said when he picked up, it's Loretta Bishop. I hate to call you this late, but my freezer's gone out, and I've got 30 pounds of homecoming chicken about to turn. Say no more, Loretta. "Bring it," he said. "I'll meet you at my back door. You cooked for my mama's repast, Loretta. Chicken's the least I can do." And by midnight that chicken was safe. And by Sunday 400 people ate, and to this day not one soul in that church knows the freezer ever failed. That is the work. The whole point of it is that you never see it. A homecoming that goes right looks, from the pew, like the food appeared out of the air. It was never easy. It was 100 quiet saves nobody was ever meant to notice. And that is exactly why it was so easy to throw me out. You do not defend against a danger you cannot see. They had never seen the freezer save, or the 100 like it. So they had no notion what a bare kitchen looks like without the woman who makes them. Now you know the kitchen. Here is how they took it from me. It started, like a lot of trouble does, with somebody new and something called progress. We got a new pastor a year and a half ago, a young man gifted in the pulpit, with big ideas about growing the church and modernizing. That was his word. And my daughter-in-law, Simone, saw her chance. Now I love Simone. I want that said, because it is true, and because my son Andre loves her, and my 2 grandbabies came out of her. But Simone has spent her whole life being the most educated person in whatever room she walks into, and she came up believing that if a thing is not written down and credentialed and run off a spreadsheet, it is not real work. It is just something an old woman does. She got herself onto the homecoming committee, and then she got herself made chair of it, and she started using words in our meetings that our meetings had never heard before. Logistics, optics, scalability. And at the September meeting, with the anniversary bearing down on us, this being the church's 110th, with the district superintendent coming and a state representative and I do not know who all, she stood up with her tablet, and she said it. "Family, I'm going to say something, and I need everybody to hear me out," Simone said. "We love Mother Bishop. Nobody's saying we don't. But we cannot have her and a handful of volunteers just winging it for 400 people and a superintendent. It's a liability. It is not professional. This is our 110th. We need a real caterer." Sister Priscilla spoke up. God bless her. "Loretta's never once let this church down in 31 years. Not one time. And I respect that," Simone said, smooth as glass. "I do. But respect isn't a plan. Where's the food safety certification? Where's the vendor documentation? If somebody gets sick off a home kitchen and we've got the superintendent here, who's liable? The church is. I'm trying to protect this church. So what are you proposing?" asked Deacon Wilkes. "I'm proposing we bring in professionals for the anniversary. 1 year. And we honor Mother Bishop for her years of service." She turned toward me sitting there, and she softened her voice like she was doing me a favor. "Mama, you have given and given. Let somebody give back to you for once. Let us take it off your shoulders." And the room sort of murmured, because put like that, who sounds unreasonable saying no? "Loretta?" the pastor said, turning to me. "You've been quiet. What do you think?" And every head turned. This was my one moment, my chance to stand up and lay out 31 years of everything I carried. And I looked around at all those faces already half decided, and I gave them the only true answer I had. "I think you all should do what you believe is best for the church," I said. "I've always cooked for the Lord and for the people, not for a title. If the committee votes for a caterer, then I'll trust the committee." "See?" Simone said, beaming, taking it for surrender. "Mother Bishop's on board." I was not on board. I was stepping back, exactly as far back as they wanted me. But there is a world of difference between the two, and nobody in that room knew it yet. And my own son sat in the third row and studied the backs of his own hands and did not say one word. I did not fight her in that meeting. Notice that, because it is going to matter. I did not stand up and list off the 40 years and the peace I keep between Cordelia and Mavis, or the breaker, or Mr. Odom holding the hams on nothing but my word. I did not defend myself, because a part of me, an old proud part I will not pretend I do not have, thought, well, let them see. Let them just see. They found a caterer out of Atlanta, a real one, with a van that had gold lettering on the side, and a woman named Miss Prentice, who wore a headset like she was landing airplanes. She came out and did a tasting for the committee in October. Little plates with the food arranged in the middle, and a swipe of sauce dragged across with the back of a spoon. And the committee ate those little plates and dabbed their mouths and said it was elevated. That was the word that went around, elevated, and 2 Sundays before homecoming, they held the vote. In the fellowship hall. My hall. Simone ran it like a boardroom, calling for a show of hands, and I sat right there and watched it happen. All in favor of engaging professional catering for the anniversary homecoming, she said. And hands went up around that room, some quick, some slow, some barely to the shoulder, folks who could not look at me while they raised them. And, she went on, reading off her tablet, I move that we honor Mother Bishop with a special role as head greeter, welcoming our members and dignitaries at the door. All in favor. More hands. Any opposed? She said, and the room went quiet, and one hand went up in the back, old Deacon Frank's, shaking a little on his cane, and he said, I'm opposed, and I'll say why. That woman is the reason this church has eaten hot on homecoming for 31 straight years, and you are all about to find out what that was worth. And Simone thanked him for his input and wrote it in the minutes, and the motion carried anyway. A greeter, 66 years old, 31 years running that kitchen, and they voted me down to standing at the door handing out bulletins and telling folks the restroom is down the hall on the left. And then, with it all decided, Simone came around that counter to me with the new caterer's keys shining in her hand, and she set them down on the wood between us, right next to my mother's cast iron pan and my old notebook, and she smiled her generous smile. Mama, I had these cut for the new arrangement, she said, and I want you to know how much we appreciate everything you've done. Truly, it's just no offense, Mama, but homecoming's gotten too big for one home cook and a few volunteers. There it was, out loud, in front of that whole hall. A home cook. Loretta will still greet at the door, she told the room. Bright, like she was handing me a present. The first face everybody sees. I could have said 100 things. Instead, I set my hand flat on my mother's pan, and I said the only thing I had in me that would not shame that sanctuary. That sounds fine, Simone, I said. You all do what you think is best. You're not upset, are you, Mama? She asked, and there was a flicker in her, some part of her that wanted me to make it easy. Do I look upset, baby? I said. Go on and greet is a fine job. I'll greet. And that was all. She was not even being cruel, is the thing. That is what I could not make anybody understand afterward. She truly thought she was being kind, giving the old woman an easy job so she could still feel included. She smiled when she said it. She patted my hand. I looked down at that ring of shiny keys, then at that old pan under my own 2 hands, and I made a decision right there that you should hold on to clear to the end of this story. I decided to do exactly what they told me to do. Not one thing more, not one thing less. They told me to step back, so I would step back, every last inch. And everything I carried in my head, I would carry right on out that door with me. Because it was never theirs to begin with. It was mine, and nobody ever once thought to ask me for it. "All right," is all I said. I untied my apron, folded it over my arm, and I picked up my mother's pan and my old spiral notebook, and I walked out of that kitchen with my back straight, and never let one soul in that hall see what it did to me. But you saw it. And you and I both know something Simone did not know yet. We know that shiny keys do not know which butcher holds the hams. We know that a headset does not know the breaker trips on the third oven. We know that a stranger, however credentialed, cannot walk into a kitchen where two women have not spoken since 1994 and get them both to cook. The whole thing was going to come apart. Not because I would make it, but because the walls they had just torn out were load-bearing, and they had no earthly idea. Stay right here with me, because now I have to carry you through the 2 weeks in between, and the young girl named Trinity, and the phone call Miss Prentice made to Mr. Odom that came back empty, and the longest homecoming Sunday of my entire life. I went home that afternoon, and I did not cry. I will not lie and say the water did not come up behind my eyes once or twice, but I did not sit down in it. My grandmother did not raise a woman who lets her grief puddle around her ankles. I put my mother's pan back on the stove, set my notebook on its shelf, made a cup of coffee, and sat with the Lord a while. I did not pray for the dinner to fail. There was a piece of me, small and hot, that wanted to see them fall flat on their faces. But I did not pray that prayer. I prayed instead that the Lord would take the proud thing out of my chest. Because a wish for another person's ruin is a poison you drink yourself. And I prayed for Simone, that girl who thinks a spreadsheet is the same thing as a life. Then I got up in the morning and I did a thing I need you to keep hold of, because it is the heart of this whole story. And the family never saw it, and they still do not know I did it. I helped. Nobody asked me to. Nobody would have believed I did. But that Monday I drove out to Route 12 to see Mr. Odom, because I know that man. And I know that a stranger with a headset was going to call his shop and try to order meat for the whole homecoming, and I know exactly how that call was going to go. Mr. Odom is close to 80 now. He keeps the shop his daddy opened, and he cuts meat the old way, and he does not answer to computers, and he does not answer to people who talk fast. I walked in, and the bell over the door rang the same as it has rung my whole life. And he looked up from behind the case, and his whole face opened up. "Well, if it isn't the queen of the homecoming," he said. "You come to put in your hams?" And right here was where I could have said nothing at all. I could have let him hold 4 hams on my word like he does every August, then let the caterer's dinner drown for lack of them, and had my little revenge served up neat. Nobody would ever have known. But I am not built that way, and my mother would have come up out of her grave and snatched me bald. "Mr. Odom," I said, "I have got something to say to you, and I need you to hear me clean through before you get your feelings up. They have hired a caterer this year, a professional, out of Atlanta. I am not running the kitchen." His face changed. He set down the knife. "Say that again," he said. "You're not running the kitchen. On homecoming. That's right. After 31 years. Who's fool enough to think this church runs a homecoming without Loretta Bishop?" "The committee, Ray, it's decided. You heard me right. The committee voted. I am to be a greeter." I made myself smile when I said it, so he would not fuss. "Now, a woman is going to call your shop. Miss Prentice is her name, and she'll want meat for the dinner. And I am asking you, please, to treat her fair. Don't hold it against her that she isn't me. Sell her what she needs. You want me to help the woman who's taking your place. I want you to help this church feed its people. That's all this ever was. Mr. Odom looked at me over the top of his glasses a long minute. "And if I don't much feel like selling to a stranger who talks fast?" he said. "Then you sell to her anyway, for my sake," I said. "Because I do not want that dinner to fail on account of me. If it fails, I want it to fail honest, on its own 2 feet, without one finger of mine on the scale." He shook his head slow. "Now let me get this straight," he said. "They put a professional over you. And you drove clear out here to make sure I treat her right. That's about the size of it. Why? Woman, if it was me, I'd let that stranger call up here, and I'd tell her we're fresh out of everything but attitude. Because it is not her fault they voted Ray, and because I would hate to see that dinner fail on account of anything I did or didn't do. If it fails, let it fail honest, on its own 2 feet, without one finger of mine on the scale." He looked at me a long moment over the top of his glasses. "Loretta Bishop," he said, "you are a better woman than the whole lot of them put together. That is the costly kindness, and I never did it for anybody to see. I did it because it was right, and because I have found across 66 years that the only revenge worth having is the kind where you can look God in the eye afterward. I gave that caterer every fair chance to succeed. I took my thumb clean off the scale. But here is what I held back, and precise is going to matter. I never told anybody about the August cutoff. Mr. Odom sells his holiday hams by that first Saturday in August and not a day past, because that is when the other churches take theirs. I knew the caterer, coming in cold in October off a spreadsheet, would call for her meat 2 weeks out, tidy and professional, and find the drawer empty. And I said nothing, because nobody asked me. And you cannot pour 31 years of knowing into a woman who has already decided you are just an old home cook. None of it was ever on paper. It was all in me. You are 1 step ahead of them now. You see the drawer already empty, and October not even here. The family cannot see it at all. The rest of those 2 weeks, I kept my word to the letter. I stepped back. I did not go near that kitchen. I did not call Cordelia or Mavis. Sister Priscilla phoned me one evening all in a lather. "Loretta, you will not believe what that woman wants to do to the greens," she said. "Kale. She wants to put kale in the greens, and she's talking about serving the yams with some kind of I don't even know. A foam, Loretta, a foam." Well, I said, "That's the committee's business now, Priscilla, not mine. But you have to say something. They'll listen to you." "No, baby. They voted. They decided an old home cook wasn't good enough anymore. I am not about to go begging back into a room I was voted out of. If they want my opinion, they know my telephone number. Loretta Priscilla, I love you, but I am getting off this phone. Go on and enjoy your evening." And I hung up. I would not so much as give an opinion. They had told me the kitchen was too big for me, and I meant to let it be exactly as big as they had made it, with me clear outside of it. But there was one thing I did do in those 2 weeks, the tenderest part of this whole story, and I need to tell it to you slow. There is a girl in our church named Trinity. She is 13. Her mother, Sister Renata, is a good woman raising 3 children by herself, and she ushers on the second Sunday, and Trinity comes with her and sits in the back and helps fold the bulletins. Trinity is a quiet child, watchful, the kind of quiet that grown people mistake for slow, when it is actually the opposite. That girl misses nothing. Trinity had taken to following me around that kitchen the last couple of years. Not underfoot, exactly, just near. She would end up beside me at the counter, and I would hand her a bowl and a fork and set her to something, and she would do it careful and serious, and she never once asked me a foolish question. She asked good ones. She asked why I browned the butter for the cornbread when nobody else did. She asked why I put the greens by the window. She was watching, that child. She was watching the way I watched my grandmother. So the second Wednesday after the vote, Trinity's mother brought her by my house because Renata had to work a double and did not want the girl home alone. And Trinity sat at my kitchen table with her long legs folded under her. And she looked at me with those serious eyes and she said, "Miss Loretta, is it true they told you you can't cook homecoming anymore?" "It's true, baby," I said. "That's not right," she said. Just flat like that. 13 years old and no doubt in her at all. "You're the best cook in the whole church. Everybody knows that." "Well," I said, "the committee voted different. The committee's wrong." She folded her arms. "Are you gonna go? Go where, baby? To homecoming. Are you gonna go if you're not cooking?" And that stopped me a second, because it was the exact question I had been chewing on myself. "I don't rightly know yet," I told her honest. "You should go," she said. "It's your church too. Is that right? My grandma said you can't let people run you off from your own home. She said you plant your feet. Your grandma sounds like a wise woman." She was. She's passed now. Trinity shrugged, matter of fact, like children are about the hardest things. But I remember what she said. Something in me wanted to sit that child down and pour the whole bitter cup out to her. But you do not do that to a child. So I did the other thing. I got up, got down that same seasoned skillet, tied one of my aprons up short around that skinny girl and said, "Come here. I am going to teach you to make the cornbread. The real kind. How my mother made it, and her mother made it. And once it's in you, baby, nobody can vote it out of you. Watch the butter," I told her, swirling it in the little pan over the flame. "Everybody gets scared right here and pulls it off too soon. You have to have nerve, baby. Take it right up to the edge, right up to where you are sure it's about to burn, and catch it at the last second. That is the whole secret. Just nerve." "It smells like pecans," she said, leaning in close. "That's how you know. Now the buttermilk, and you want it a little tangy, a little turned. And feel this pan." I let her put her hand near the cast iron, not on it, screaming hot before one drop of batter touches it, so it sets a crust the second it lands. You hear it sizzle. You did it right. She got it on the second try. Her cornbread came out of my oven gold and crackling, and she stood over it a long moment. "Miss Loretta," she said, "why didn't you ever write this down? What if you forgot it?" And Lord, if that was not my own voice coming back to me across 50 years, the very thing I asked my mother on this same question. So I gave her the answer my mother gave me. Baby. I could never forget it, and now neither can you. I didn't put it on a paper you could lose. I put it in you, where it can't be lost, and can't be stole, and can't be voted out by any committee that ever sat down. My own mother did it just this way with me. This is how we keep what's ours. In us, she said. In us, I told her. And she nodded, slow and serious, 13 years old, and I saw that she truly understood, down in the bone, and I tell you my eyes stung. I did not teach her to spite anybody. I taught her because a thing you carry only in your head dies with you if you do not pour it into a living person before you go. And keep your eye on Trinity, because she is not done in this story. Not by a long way. Cordelia came by too in those 2 weeks. She showed up on my porch on a Saturday morning with a jar of her fig preserves, which is how Cordelia says a thing she does not have the words to say, and she sat in my kitchen, and she was hot about the whole business. I am not cooking for that woman, she told me, meaning the caterer. I have been doing the greens for this homecoming since before that Simone was born, and I will not be bossed around my own kitchen by some Atlanta woman with a wire on her head. And I'll tell you something else, Loretta. If you're not in that kitchen, I'm not in that kitchen. That's the end of it. And right there was where I could have taken my revenge, if I had wanted it. All I had to do was agree with her. Say the word, Loretta, Cordelia said. You say don't cook, and I won't, and I'll take half that kitchen out the door with me. They'll see quick enough what you were worth. Lord, it was tempting. All I had to do was nod. No, I told her, and I took her hand across my kitchen table. Listen to me now. You do whatever your own heart tells you to do that Sunday. I'd never tell you how to feel, but I refuse to be the reason this church's homecoming falls apart, and I don't want you to be either. So you're saying cook. I'm saying if you go and cook, you cook for the Lord and for those 400 people. Not for the committee, not for that caterer. And if you feel called to stay home, you stay home with a clear conscience. But you make that choice for you, Cordelia. Don't make it as a favor to me, and don't you make it as a knife for them. She looked at me a long time. You are a better woman than I am, Loretta Bishop. That's not true. I just have a few more years of getting my pride sanded down than you do. She laughed, and the heat went out of her, and she took her fig preserves back off my table and said she'd think on it, and she left. And I did not know, when she drove off, what Cordelia would decide. Neither did she. Hold on to that, because her decision, when it came in the worst possible moment, and it nearly sank everything before I could get down those stairs. I spent a good part of those 2 weeks on my knees. I would catch myself lying awake rehearsing the moment they would come crawling back, savoring it, and then I would hear my grandmother's voice and get up and pray it back down. By the time homecoming Sunday came, when I imagined the dinner failing, I did not feel glad. I felt sorry. Sorry for Simone, sorry for the church, sorry for 400 hungry people. That was a work of grace, and God did it in me, and it is the reason I was able to do what I did in that vestibule without one drop of poison in it. Now, the vote had happened. My hams were unspoken for out at Mr. Odom's. Trinity had the cornbread in her hands. Cordelia was undecided, and homecoming was coming on like weather you can see rolling in over the mountain. Now the caterer's tasting. I heard about it 3 separate times from 3 separate people, and every account matched. And it is important you understand how good it looked, how completely it dazzled them. Because the higher they got lifted up, the harder the fall was going to come. Miss Prentice came out to the fellowship hall on a Tuesday evening with 2 young people in matching black aprons and a folding table she set up with a white cloth. She laid out little white plates. On each one, a small serving arranged just so. A swipe of some bright sauce dragged across with the back of a spoon. A sprig of something green laid on top with a pair of tweezers. She had a fried chicken that she called buttermilk brined with a honey drizzle. She had collard greens she had done, and I will give her this. They were pretty, dark and glossy in a little ring. She had a macaroni baked in individual cups with a crumb on top, browned under a torch. And she stood there in her clean blazer with her headset around her neck, and she talked the committee through every plate like a woman narrating a nature program. The committee lost their minds. Now that, said Sister Priscilla, dabbing her mouth, that is the most elegant thing I have ever put in my mouth. Look how it's presented. Look at that little green sprig. It's called micro-arugula, Miss Prentice said. We source it from a farm outside the city. Micro-arugula, Sister Priscilla repeated, like she was saying a word in a foreign tongue at church, and everybody nodded, impressed. And this holds for 400? Asked Deacon Wilkes, ever the practical one. Absolutely, Miss Prentice said, without a blink. We do events this size and larger every weekend. We bring our own equipment. We plate in stations. We have a whole system. Now you've seen our kitchen? Deacon Wilkes pressed. It's a small kitchen. Old. I've seen the photos Simone sent. It's charming. We'll make it work. That's the second time you've said make it work, said Miss Verna, quiet, from the end of the table. Nobody paid her any mind, see? Simone said, turning to the room glowing. A system. That is exactly what I've been saying. This is what it looks like when you do it right. She looked over at Andre. Baby, tell them. Isn't this beautiful? And my own son, God help him, looked at that pretty cold plate and said, It sure is something, Simone, which is not a yes, if you know how to listen. But everybody in that room heard it as one. Sister Priscilla, who 2 days later would be calling me in a full panic, sat there that Tuesday convinced. Simone beamed. And Andre confessed to me later, much later, when he could finally hold my eye, that even he had thought, sitting there, well, maybe Mama's time really has passed. Maybe this is what the church needs now. Maybe the old way is just old. The superintendent was coming with a delegation. A state representative had accepted. The local paper was coming out for the 110th. And here was this polished woman, with her torch and her tweezers, against the picture in everybody's mind of the old suppers with the mismatched pans and the house aprons. I understand why the tasting won. It looked like the future. It looked like arriving somewhere. There was one person at that tasting who was not fooled, and she is worth telling about, because she is proof that the old knowing does not lie even when everybody talks over it. Miss Verna, 81 years old, keeper of the red velvet cake for 51 years, sat at that tasting and ate her little plate, and said nothing while everybody else carried on. And afterward she found me at church on Wednesday, and she took my arm with her thin, hard little hand, and she said, Loretta, I'll tell you what I told nobody at that table. That woman's food is pretty, and it is cold, and pretty and cold don't feed 400 people at noon. You marked me. I have been cooking in that hall since Eisenhower, and I know a kitchen that's going to hold, and a kitchen that's going to fall, and that one is going to fall, and when it does, they are going to come looking for you. And then she patted my arm and went on to choir practice. I did not say much back to Miss Verna, but I have thought 100 times since that the two people in that whole church who saw clearest were the 81-year-old and the 13-year-old. The oldest hands and the youngest eyes. Everybody in the middle, with the credentials and the tablets and the committee seats, could not see it at all. What none of them tasted, sitting there with those pretty little plates, was that the food was cold. Not cold on the table. Cooked to be photographed, not to be served hot to 400 people out of a 1968 kitchen with a breaker that trips on the third oven. A tasting for 11 is a different animal from feeding 400 hot at noon, and the difference is not talent. It is timing and relationships. And knowing the room, knowing Deacon Frank cannot have the greens if they touched pork, or his gout will lay him flat. Knowing the old folks eat at noon sharp because their medicine is timed to it. Knowing you have got exactly 45 minutes between the benediction and 400 hungry folks on the stairs, and every hot thing has to hit its mark. None of that was on the spreadsheet. It could not be. Knowledge that lives in a person's head is invisible until the day that person is not standing there. So the tasting sailed, and the committee signed the contract. There was a walk through the Thursday before homecoming, and I heard about that one from Trinity too, who was there folding programs and does not miss one solitary thing. Miss Prentice came to see the kitchen for the first time, not to cook, just to look. And Trinity told me the caterer walked in, got quiet, turned around slow and said, "This is smaller than I pictured." Then she opened the oven doors and looked inside and made a face. "Simone, can the church rent some equipment? Warming boxes, maybe an extra oven off a truck? This'll be tight." "The budget's already stretched thin," Simone told her. "Can't you just make it work? You're the professional." "I can make it work, Miss," Prentice said. Trinity looked at me when she told me that part, and this 13-year-old girl said, "Miss Loretta." She never once asked how you did it. She just kept saying she'd make it work. But she doesn't know what it is. Out of the mouths of babes. She doesn't know what it is. Nobody, not the caterer, not the committee, not Simone, had ever once sat down and asked me what it was I actually did. They saw an old woman at a stove and figured the thing was the stove. My son, too, before we get to Sunday, because Andre is a piece of this I cannot leave out. Andre came by my house that same week. He is a grown man, 40 years old, a good provider, and he sat in my front room and he could not look at me. He turned his coffee cup around and around in his hands. "Mama," he finally said, "you're not upset about this greeter thing, are you? Because Simone means well. She just wants the church to look good for the superintendent." "Do I look upset to you, Andre?" "No, ma'am." "That's what worries me a little, honestly. Drink your coffee," I said. And I studied my boy. And I saw the little boy he used to be, the one who could never stand for anybody to be angry, who would do just about anything to keep the peace in a room, even if it meant a wrong went unspoken. I understood him. But understanding a thing is not the same as excusing it. "Andre," I said, "I won't carry on and make you choose between your mama and your wife. I would never put that on you. But I am going to ask you one question, and you answer it honest. In that meeting, when they voted your mother down to a greeter, before the whole church after 31 years, did you say one word?" He was quiet a long time. "No, ma'am," he said. "I didn't." "Why not?" "I don't know, Mama. It happened fast. I didn't want to embarrass Simone in front of everybody. And I figured it wasn't that big a deal. Just a title." "Just a title," I said. "You're going to make me feel bad about this, aren't you?" "No, baby. You're going to do that all by yourself, in about 2 weeks. I am not asking you to fix it now. I am just asking you to sit with it, because a day is coming, sooner than you think, when everybody in that church is going to see plain what I have been for that kitchen. And when it comes, remember this afternoon, and remember that your mama did not tell you it was coming, even though she could have. She let you find it out with your own eyes, the same as everybody else. Now drink your coffee before it's cold." He drank his coffee, and he left, and he did not fix it, because a man like Andre cannot fix a thing until it is broken in front of him. But I had planted the seed, and it would come up on Sunday. Hold on to that. My boy has a reckoning of his own in this story, and it is a tender one. And the committee came to me, kindly, with the greeter's sash. The Sunday before homecoming, after service, Simone found me in the vestibule. She had the sash in her hand, a length of blue satin with greeter stitched on it in gold. And she was smiling that smile she smiles, the one that thinks it is being generous. "Mama, I had this made special for you," she said. She held it out with both hands like it was a gift. "You'll be the first face everybody sees when they come home. Isn't that the most important job of all?" Now, there were a great many things I might have said. I stood there and 31 years rose up in my throat, and I could have listed every one of them out. The hams, the breaker, Cordelia and Mavis, and the peace I keep at that far counter. The 45 minutes, Mr. Odom holding my order on nothing but my word. I wanted to say, "Girl, do you have the first idea what you are throwing away?" But I have learned a thing about proud people, and Simone, God love her, is proud in the exact way I used to be proud before life sanded it off me. You cannot tell a proud person the truth. They cannot hear it. It bounces off. The only thing a proud person will ever believe is the thing they find out for themselves, the hard way, standing in the wreckage. So I did not spend my breath. I reached out, and I took that blue satin sash out of her hands, and I said, "Thank you, Simone." That was thoughtful. And I meant the thank you is the strange part, because I already knew, standing in that vestibule, that she was about to learn something no lecture from me could ever have taught her. The kindest thing I could do was let her learn it. Let me lay the stakes out plain for you here, like you count them up before a storm, so you have got every number in your hand when Sunday comes. 31 years I had run that kitchen. 400 plates had to land hot in a 45-minute window. 4 ovens on a breaker that trips if 3 run cold at once. 3 feuding kitchen circles that would not take an order from a stranger. 1 butcher who answers his phone for exactly 1 person in this world, and it is not the caterer. 110 years of church history riding on this single Sunday, a superintendent, a state representative, and a newspaper, all coming to watch. And every bit of the knowledge that had made it work for 3 generations, walking around inside the head of a 66-year-old woman they had just pinned a greeter sash on. Simone had no idea the ovens shared a single breaker. She did not know the hams were already gone. She had no idea Cordelia and Mavis would sooner walk out than take orders from a woman in a headset. She had no idea. But she was about to. Homecoming Sunday came up clear and warm. One of those gold October mornings God seems to save for the days that matter. And I put on my good navy dress, and I pinned my mother's head wrap over my hair, and I fastened that blue satin greeter sash across my chest, and I drove to church to stand at the door and watch the whole thing come down. Now, if you have made it this far into the story with me, then I already know something about you. I know you are the kind of person who has been overlooked once or twice yourself. And who knows in your bones that the quiet work is the real work. So do me the kindness of tapping that subscribe button before we go on, because this channel is where we tell the stories of the folks the world calls small, and I do not want you to miss the next one. Now come on, let me get you inside that church. The service ran long, like anniversary services do, extra music. A guest preacher. The reading of the church roll going clear back to the founders. I stood at my post by the front doors in my sash, and I greeted every soul that came through. And there is a mercy in a humble job you do not expect. I got to lay eyes on people I had not seen in years. I got to hug necks. Old Deacon Frank came through on his cane and squeezed my hand and said, "It don't feel like homecoming without you at that stove, Loretta." And I patted him and told him to go on and find his seat, that everything was in good hands. I just never said whose hands. But the whole time I was greeting and hugging, one ear of mine was turned toward the fellowship hall downstairs. Because I know that kitchen better than I know my own, and I could hear, underneath the organ, that it was already going wrong. Here is what was happening down there while the church sang, pieced together afterward from Trinity, who saw all of it, and from Cordelia and Sister Priscilla. Miss Prentice had arrived at 7 with her van and her crew of 3. Her beautiful spreadsheet plan was to bring all the hot food up to temperature in the final hour, so it would be fresh at noon. Restaurant thinking, so around 11 o'clock, clock running down, she went along that back wall and turned on the ovens, all of them. 1, 2, 3 dials, boom, 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 cold ovens all pulling for heat at the very same moment. and the breaker in that gray metal box did what it has done since 1968. It tripped, and the whole kitchen went dark and dead silent. Now picture it. The mixers stop. The lights go out. The 2 warming trays die, and Miss Prentice stands there in a black kitchen she has never worked in, holding a spatula, with no earthly notion what just happened. "What did you do?" she said to her crew, according to Trinity, who was standing right there. "What did somebody just do?" "Nothing, chef," the young man said. "I didn't touch anything. The whole room just went out." "Well, find me the panel. Somebody find me the electrical panel." And she sent him running upstairs to find help, and he came up right during the offering, looking gray in the face. And he leaned down over the 3rd pew and whispered in Simone's ear. I watched that from my post at the door. I watched my daughter-in-law's face while a boy in a black apron whispered to her. I watched her go still, and then I watched her get up as quiet as she could and slip out the side, headset already in her hand. I did not move. Know that about me. I did not run down there. I stood at my door in my greeter's sash, and I greeted the last stragglers coming in, and I let it unspool exactly as they had built it to unspool. Down in the kitchen, it got worse, and it got worse fast, like trouble always stacks up once the first domino goes. Miss Prentice found the breaker box, eventually, and flipped the big breaker back, and the lights came on. And in her professional haste, wanting to make up the lost time, she went right back down that row and turned all the ovens on again at once. And it tripped again. "Why does it keep doing that?" she said, flipping it back and forth. "Is this thing broken? Somebody tell me this building's not falling apart." "It's always done that," Miss Verna said from her corner, arms folded, not moving 1 inch to help. "Loretta knows how to work it." "Well, Loretta's not here, Miss," Prentice snapped, "so that doesn't help me much, does it?" "No," Miss Verna said. "I don't suppose it does." And that old breaker, once you have abused it, gets stubborn and needs to sit a minute before it will catch. So now she is a good 45 minutes behind on ovens that will not stay on, and the benediction is coming. And that was when she went looking for the hams. Except there were no hams. She got her supplier on the phone, and Trinity heard the whole one-sided side of it. "What do you mean the truck's not coming till 2? I have 400 people at noon. No, that doesn't work. Where's my backup order?" A silence. "What August cutoff? Nobody told me about any the butcher out on Route 12? I called him weeks ago. His kid said they were out, I assumed, and then quiet. The sound of a woman realizing the floor is gone from under her, so there's no meat. There's no meat coming at all." She had called Mr. Odom's shop back in October, and the grandson had told her plain the holiday hams were long gone, that those sell out the first week of August. Everybody in the county knows it. She had figured she would source it elsewhere, and never circled back. And in the crush of 100 details, it slipped clean through her spreadsheet. And now it was the anniversary Sunday, and half of Atlanta's suppliers were closed. So, no working ovens, no ham, the greens not done. And now the third thing, the human thing. The thing no spreadsheet on this earth could have caught. The volunteers would not obey her. "And you could hear it," Trinity said, "right out in the open. I need everybody at their stations. Let's go, we're behind." Miss Prentice was calling out. "You and you. I need you both on this counter. Plating. I don't plate next to her," Cordelia said, flat, meaning Mavis. "Never have." "Ma'am, I don't have time for whatever this is. I need you don't have time," Mavis said, taking off her apron. "No, you surely don't." And Miss Verna, 81 years old, who does not raise her voice for any soul living, looked that caterer dead in the eye and said, "Young lady, I have made the red velvet cake for this church for 51 years, and I will make it today. But I will not be spoke to like hired help in my own house of worship." And she picked up her cake and carried it to the far end, and would not be moved. See, the church still sent its women down to help, same as they always do. That was never going to change. Homecoming is their day too. But those women had spent 31 years taking their marching orders from me, standing where I put them, in the peace I kept. And here comes a stranger with a headset barking about mise en place and plating windows, putting Cordelia and Mavis at the same counter, because a stranger does not know and cannot know that you never ever do that. So they laid down their aprons one by one and folded their arms, and the kitchen quit being a kitchen. The kitchen did the one thing Simone never accounted for. It stopped being a kitchen and went back to being a room full of proud, tired, faithful women who had been told by a stranger that their own hands did not know their own work. And they were done. Stand in that kitchen with me for a minute, in those last minutes before the benediction, because Trinity was down there and she told me all of it afterward, every detail, and it is a thing I will carry to my grave. She said, "Miss Prentice was moving faster and faster and getting less and less done, which is what fear does in a kitchen. One young man on his knees at an oven that would not light, the other running to the van for a warming box too big to fit through the door, because nobody had measured the door. Trinity said the caterer picked up her phone 3 times to call somebody and set it back down each time, because who do you call? There is no number for how do I feed 400 people in a kitchen I do not understand in 30 minutes. That number was standing upstairs in a greeter's sash, and she did not have it. And Trinity, 13 years old, stood over in the corner by the cornbread station where I had taught her to stand, and she watched grown women she had known her whole life take off their aprons one by one. And later she told me the thing that broke my heart clean in 2. "Miss Loretta, I almost started the cornbread myself," she said. "I know how. You taught me. I had the pan in my hand. But I didn't." "Why not, baby?" "Because nobody was in charge, and I'm just a kid, and I didn't know if I was allowed." And I held that girl close. You did right to wait. But hear me now. There is coming a day soon when you are going to be the one who knows how, and everybody around you is going to be standing there frozen. And on that day, Trinity, you do not wait for anybody's permission. On that day, you pick up the pan. You hear me? Yes, ma'am. But that Sunday was not her day yet. That Sunday was mine. Now here is the terrible part. All of that ruin was invisible to the 400 people upstairs singing the closing hymn. They smelt nothing, because nothing was cooking. They were about to come downstairs happy and hungry into a room with no food in it. That is how a load-bearing wall works. Right up until the second the roof falls, everything looks fine from the front porch. By the time the guest preacher said amen and pronounced the benediction upstairs, the situation in that fellowship hall was total. The ovens would not hold. The main meat was gone. The greens were half raw. The women had scattered to the walls with their arms folded. The macaroni that was supposed to brown under the torch sat pale and cold. Miss Prentice stood in the thick of it with her head set off now, just hanging around her neck, her face the color of ash, and her 2 young people looking at her like children who want to be told what to do by somebody who knows. And upstairs, 400 people, plus the district superintendent, plus a state representative, plus a man from the newspaper with a camera, all stood up out of the pews and began, hungry and happy and expectant, to file toward the stairs that led down to the homecoming dinner that was not there. Keep your seat. Because this is the moment the whole thing turned, and it did not turn the way you might think. Nobody stood up and shouted. There was no scene. What happened next was quieter than that, and it cut deeper. And it started with my daughter-in-law walking up a flight of stairs with the whole disaster behind her, to find the one person in that building who could stop 400 people from walking into a catastrophe. Let me set the clock for you, because timing is the whole thing, and it was timing that nearly turned a mess into a public disaster before the district superintendent himself. When a benediction ends at our church on homecoming, 400 people do not wait around. They have been sitting in a pew for 2 hours and they can smell dinner, or on this Sunday, they could not smell dinner, which some of the older ones noticed and remarked on, because by then the kitchen should have had the whole downstairs smelling like fried chicken, and the stairwell should have been warm with it, and it was not. It was cold and quiet, and a few of the deacons were starting to look at one another, and the head usher, not knowing a single thing was wrong, did what he does every year the second the pastor says amen. He opened the doors to the stairwell, and he began to direct people down to the fellowship hall to eat. So now picture it with me. 400 people beginning to flow toward a stairwell that led down to a dark, foodless, apron-strewn kitchen, with the superintendent and his delegation right in the thick of the crowd, and a newspaper man with a camera. 30 more seconds, and the front of that crowd would have been standing in the doorway of a catastrophe, and there would have been no hiding it, no fixing it, no saving anybody's face. It would have been the story of the 110th anniversary forever. The year the homecoming had no dinner, and it was me who stopped it, before anybody had even asked. I saw those doors open, saw the crowd begin to move, and 31 years of instinct went off in me like an alarm bell, because I know to the minute how long that kitchen needs, and I knew nothing was ready. So I stepped out into the flow of people and raised my voice warm and easy. Now, family, let's not stampede these stairs. We've got dignitaries with us today, I called out. Let's let the superintendent and our elders be seated up here first, and we'll bring everybody down in good order. Visit a minute. Y'all have not seen each other in a year. And I steered that whole crowd, 400 strong, into milling and visiting up top a few more minutes, buying time nobody knew I was buying, before a single soul got a look at that dark kitchen. The greeter, doing the one thing only the old cook would have known to do. Even in the sash, I was still holding the wall up, and not one of them saw it. It was about 90 seconds after that I saw Simone come up out of the stairwell. I almost did not know her. This is a woman who is never anything but put together, hair sharp, makeup flawless, back straight as a fence post. And what came up out of that stairwell was a woman with her blazer sleeves pushed up, and a smear of something dark down one arm, and her eyes gone wide and wet at the edges. She looked up the length of that vestibule, and she found me standing there in my greeter's sash, and she stopped. The hall behind me was filling up, everybody bright and hungry and waiting to be called down to eat. And here comes Simone across that floor toward me, past all of them, and I watched every step of it, and never moved to meet her halfway. Not out of spite. It is only that some walks a person has to make all on their own, every step, or the lesson does not take. She stopped in front of me, and for a second she could not get any words out at all. And then she said, "Lo, just for me, Mama, it's all gone wrong." "What's wrong, baby?" I said. Gentle, like I did not already know every inch of it. "The ovens won't stay on. There's no ham. The greens aren't done. Miss Verna and them won't listen to Miss Prentice. They've all just stopped. And there's 400 people about to come down those stairs, and there is no dinner." Her voice cracked clean in half on that last word. "There is no dinner, Mama. In 20 minutes there will be nothing to serve, with the superintendent sitting right there. Slow down now." "Breathe. I can't breathe, Mama. I did this. I did all of this." I looked at her a long moment, You hired a professional, I said. Not mean, just true. Have you asked her to fix it? She can't, Mama. She's down there crying on a bucket in the pantry. She doesn't know this kitchen. She doesn't know any of it. She doesn't know why the power keeps cutting out. She doesn't know where the meat is supposed to come from. She can't get Miss Verna and them to so much as look at her, and you're telling me all this because? She stopped, because she heard it, coming out of her own mouth, the shape of the thing she had refused to hear for 2 months. She doesn't know why the power keeps cutting out. And standing right in front of her was the one woman on God's green earth who did. Because you know, she said, so small. You know all of it. You always did. And this is the whole hinge of the story. Simone could have gone back downstairs and muscled through it. Saved face, served 400 people cold macaroni, and told the superintendent the caterer had an off day. Pride would have had her do exactly that. But somewhere under all the credentials there is a good woman. And the good woman won. She took a breath, and she raised her voice, and she did the thing that could not be undone. She turned halfway around so the people in that hall could hear her, the committee members drifting near, Sister Priscilla, 2 of the deacons, and yes, the superintendent close enough to catch it, and she said it out loud. Mother Bishop. Not Mama now. Mother Bishop, my church name, the respectful one. I was wrong. I was wrong about all of it. That kitchen needs you. This church needs you. I am asking you, in front of God and everybody, please, will you come and save our homecoming? The hall went quiet. You could hear the old clock on the wall. The committee that had voted me down to greet her 2 Sundays back was standing right there. And not one of them was looking at their shoes now. They were looking at me, and from over by the wall, old Deacon Frank's voice came, quiet, but everybody heard it. Told you, he said. Told every one of you. Please, Mother Bishop, said Sister Priscilla, stepping up beside Simone, wringing her hands. We were wrong. I was wrong, and I voted for it, and I'm sorry. Please, and one of the deacons who had raised his hand against me 2 Sundays back just said, Lo, we need you, Loretta. Plain as that. And here is where you might expect me to have my moment. 31 years, and the woman who called me a home cook standing in front of me begging, in public, with the superintendent looking on. This is the part where the wronged woman gets to draw herself up and let them have it. Where she says, oh, so now you need the old home cook. Do you? Where she makes them wait and squeezes every drop out of it. I did not do that. And here is why. Because it is the most important thing I know, and it took me 66 years to learn it. Gloating is just pride, wearing a different dress. It is the same ugliness that put that sash on me, only now it would be riding my shoulders instead of hers. And I never carried that kitchen for the credit. I carried it because 400 of God's people needed feeding, and feeding people is holy work, and holy work does not care one bit who feels important. The dinner needed saving. The people were hungry. That was the only fact in that vestibule that mattered to me. So I did not make her wait. I said not one word about the vote, or the sash, or the home cook, or the tasting. I reached up and unpinned that blue satin greeter sash from across my chest, folded it once, and put it in her hands. Hold that for me, baby, I said. Mama, she started, and her voice broke. Not now, Simone. Now we've got people to feed. And that was all the answer she got, and it was the only answer that mattered. The superintendent stepped over then, that big organ voice pitched low. Mother Bishop, is there anything my people can do to help? Yes, sir, there is, I told him. You can go on and sit down, get comfortable, and give me 45 minutes. And when I send that food up, you eat it hot, and you tell me if a home cook can't feed a homecoming. He laughed, surprised, and he said, "Yes, ma'am," like a boy. And he went and sat down. Then I turned to the hall and raised my voice, calm and clear, the voice I have used in that fellowship hall for 31 years. "All right now, family, everybody hold tight just a few more minutes. Visit with each other. You haven't seen each other all year. The food is coming, and it is going to be worth the wait. Deacon Frank, you get these folks singing something with some verses to it." I got just the one. Deacon Frank called back, and he started them into a hymn with about 9 verses. God bless that man, because he knew exactly what I was asking him for. Time. And then I went down those stairs to my kitchen. Every single step of what I did down there was a thing that lived only in my head, a thing they had thrown away. Watch how much they had thrown away. The scene in that kitchen when I came down the stairs would have broken your heart. Ms. Prentice was standing by the dead ovens with her arms wrapped around herself. Her 2 young people were frozen. Cordelia was over against the far wall with her coat already half on. Mavis was by the pantry with her lips pressed to nothing. Miss Verna had her red velvet cake up on the counter like a woman guarding a baby. And the whole room, when I walked in, went dead quiet and turned to look at me. "Loretta," Miss Verna breathed out when she saw me. "Thank the Lord." "Miss Loretta's here," one of the caterer's young men said to the other, like a person spotting land from a sinking boat. Though he had never laid eyes on me before in his life, I did not make a speech. I tied on my apron, the one I keep in the bottom drawer by the sink, the one that has been mine 3 decades running, and I rolled up my sleeves. "All right, family," I said. "We're going to fix this, and we'll fix it together, and there will be 400 plates hot in 45 minutes, so let's go on and go to work." First thing, the breaker. I went to the gray box by the mop closet and I flipped the main back on, and then I stood there with my hand flat on that box for a good half a minute, letting it settle, because I told you, once that old breaker has been abused, it sulks. Then I turned to the ovens, and I brought them up the only way the kitchen will ever let you bring them up. 1. I turned on the first oven and I stood there and I waited, my hand nowhere near another dial, and I let that first one come clear up to temperature and hold. Only then, only once it was steady, did I reach over and turn on the second. And I waited again. And then the third. And then the fourth. Patient, in order. Nobody rushing me, and every one of those ovens came up and held and glowed, because that is what they will do for you if you know them, and the power never so much as flickered again. I heard Miss Prentice, behind me, say soft, almost to herself, "How did you I turn them all on and it just they share a breaker?" "Sugar," I said, not unkind. "This kitchen was wired in 1968. You run 3 cold at once, it trips every time. You bring them up one at a time and let each one catch, and she'll cook all day for you." I did not say it to shame her. I said it because it was true, and because a woman standing in the wreckage is finally able to hear the truth, and I would not have her walk away from this day thinking she was a bad caterer. She was a fine caterer. She just was not our caterer, and nobody can be. Cold. Second thing, the meat. I dried my hands and I took my own telephone out of my apron pocket, and I called Mr. Odom's shop on a Sunday when it was closed. And it rang, and it rang, and then that old man picked up, because he has caller identification now, and he saw my name, and he answers for exactly one person on a Sunday afternoon, and I am that person. "Loretta," he said, "I heard it all went sideways up there. That caterer's grandson order business. It surely did, and I am standing smack in the wreck of it right now," I said. "Mr. Odom, I need meat for 400, and I need it in 20 minutes, and I know that is a sin to ask on the Lord's day. Now hold on. That fancy woman called my shop 2 weeks ago wanting hams, he said. 2 weeks. In October. I told my grandson, whoever that is, she don't know this county from a hog pen. Where were you? Why weren't you calling me? Because they voted me out, Mr. Odom. Made me a greeter. There was a silence on that line, and then that old man said a word I will not repeat in the house of the Lord. A greeter, he said. You, all right. Here's what you've got. I've got 2 cases of smoked turkey necks and 4 of my good smoked shoulders I was holding back for a barbecue Tuesday. They are yours. My grandson will run them up the mountain right this minute. Ray Odom, I could kiss you through this telephone. You just saved me a plate of that cornbread, he said, and we're square. 12 minutes, and he hung up. And 12 minutes later, on a closed Sunday, his grandson came through the back door of that fellowship hall with the meat in his arms. That is what happens when you have spent 40 years being somebody a man will answer his phone for on the Lord's day. You cannot hire it. You cannot credential it. It is built 1 pan of food at a time across a lifetime, and it either exists or it does not, and for our homecoming it existed only in me. Third thing, and this was the tenderest, the people. I turned around to Cordelia with her coat half on, and over to Mavis by the pantry, and I said not a word about their feud, because I never do. I just went back to being the middle they both stand on. Now, here is where Cordelia's decision nearly cost us everything, the thing I told you to hold on to. Because Cordelia, in that dead kitchen, had already made up her mind to leave. She had her coat half on when I came down. She had told that caterer no, and she had meant it, and she is not a woman who means a thing easily. And when I said her name, she shook her head at me. Loretta, I told them I wasn't cooking, and I'm not going back on it, she said. It's the principle. And I met her eyes, and never argued the principle, because she was right about the principle. Instead, I reached for the one thing that would move her. Cordelia, I'm not asking you to cook for them. Look at me. I'm asking you to cook with me. Those are 2 different things, and you know they are. There are 400 of God's people about to come down those stairs, old Deacon Frank up there. Sister Adeline, who just buried Harold, a whole crowd of children. They didn't vote on anything. They're just hungry. So this is not a favor for the committee. It's you and me at that window counter, one more time, feeding the Lord's people. Will you do that? With me? And Cordelia looked at the coat half on her arm, and she took it back off, slow, and hung it on the hook. At the window, she said, same as always. And she rolled up her sleeves, and over by the pantry, Mavis, who had watched all of it with her arms folded, unfolded them. Well, if Cordelia's staying, I'm surely not leaving, Mavis said, to nobody, to everybody. Somebody's got to make the yams right. That is 40 years of those 2. And I have played it both directions more times than I can count. Get the one, you get the other, because neither will ever let the other be the bigger woman. Mavis, baby, I said, I need your candied yams, and I need them like only you make them, and you are on the pantry side, right where you always are. Trinity, and here my heart just about came up out of my chest. Because that child had been standing there the whole time watching like she watches everything. Trinity, honey, wash your hands. You are on the cornbread. You know how. I taught you. Show them. And that 13-year-old girl walked up to my mother's cast iron pan, the one Simone had set the keys down next to 2 Sundays back, and she browned that butter till it went the color of an old penny, and she had the nerve to take it right up to the edge. and she made the cornbread. For 400 people, on homecoming. And it came out gold and crackling, tray after tray, and Miss Verna looked over at that child working, and something in the old woman's face just melted, and she came off her wall and set her cake down in its place of honor and said, "Well, put me to work, Loretta. I'm not standing here like a fence post." And just like that, my kitchen was my kitchen again. I put everybody where they go. I set the piece back. I timed the ovens. I had Miss Prentice's 2 young people running plates. Because they were good workers, they had just never been led. And Miss Prentice herself. I found her in the pantry, where Simone had said she was, sitting on an overturned bucket, with her face in her hands. This credentialed Atlanta woman, who had walked in that morning so sure of herself, undone. And I could have left her there. It would have been the easiest thing. But I do not leave people sitting on buckets in my pantry, not even the woman hired to replace me. I crouched down in front of her, my knees popping, like they do now, and I said, "Get up off that bucket, sugar, come on." She looked up at me, and her face was a wreck. "I don't understand what happened," she said. "I've catered weddings for 300. I've done galas. I don't understand how the power. Did anybody tell you about the breaker? What breaker?" "That's what happened," I said. "You walked into somebody else's kitchen and somebody else's church and somebody else's 40 years and tried to run it like it was yours. Not hard, just level. That is not a failing in you as a cook. It is only that some things you cannot buy and cannot fake and cannot learn in a week, and this kitchen is one of them. They should have kept you," she said. So quiet I almost missed it. "I told Simone this morning," I said, "whoever set this up, I'd like to meet them." "I had no idea it was you that's behind us now," I said. "I need a good hand on the plating line, and I hear you've got one. So dry your face, come stand beside me, and let's feed these people together. All right?" She braced for me to gloat, and instead I was pulling her up off a bucket, and she could not account for it. But she got up, and she plated beside me, quick and clean and lovely, the professional and the home cook feeding the same people off the same warm plates. I have no use for a revenge that wastes a good worker. Those were the sweetest 45 minutes of my whole year. The kitchen came alive. The greens hollered in Cordelia's pot. The smoked shoulders hit the hot ovens, and the smell rolled up that stairwell into the hall, and a low murmur went through the crowd. Oh, now something's cooking. Trinity's cornbread crackled in my mother's cast iron. Mavis's yams went syrupy and dark. Miss Verna set out her red velvet like a crown on the whole thing. And I stood in the middle of my kitchen and called the timing out loud, like my mother used to, the times and temperatures like a song. "Cordelia, pull your greens in 6 minutes, not before." 6 minutes, Cordelia called back. "Trinity, baby, next tray in the top oven. That one runs hottest." "Top oven, yes ma'am." "Mavis, hold your yams warm, don't let them set up on me." "They won't set, Loretta, Miss Prentice. Plate the chicken as it comes off, 3 pieces, don't crowd it. And somebody bring me the rolls at 11:50 and not 1 second before, you hear? We will be hot, and we will be on time, so let's move like we mean it, family." "Yes, ma'am," came back from around that kitchen, 3 or 4 voices at once. And they moved. Nobody was feuding. Nobody was folding an apron. Everybody was exactly where they belonged, in the piece, doing the work. And the work was singing. 40 years fell away, and I was 17 again, and I was 66. And I was every woman who ever stood in that spot, all at once. And in 45 minutes, in that old kitchen with its stubborn breaker, 400 plates of hot food went up those stairs. fried chicken with the crust crisp, greens steaming, candied yams, macaroni baked and browned, not torched, baked Trinity's cornbread, Miss Verna's red velvet, Mr. Odom's smoked shoulders falling off the bone. It all landed hot at the same minute, just as it has landed every homecoming for 31 years, because the wall that holds that up was back where it belonged. The superintendent ate 2 plates. The state representative went back for the cornbread. "Who made this cornbread?" he asked, holding up a piece. "I need to shake this person's hand," and somebody pointed at a 13-year-old girl standing shy by the ovens, and he crossed the hall and took Trinity's flour-dusted hand in both of his and said, "Young lady, that is the finest cornbread I have had in 40 years of homecomings. You keep making that." And that child got to stand there in front of everybody and be seen. The newspaper man took his photograph of the whole hall. 400 people eating hot food and laughing, and it ran that Wednesday, and the caption, I am not making this up, said the church's 110th homecoming was a triumph of tradition. A triumph of tradition. The very tradition they had voted out 2 Sundays before. There was a moment during that dinner I will hold in my heart until I die. The superintendent, a big dignified man with a voice like a church organ, stood up partway through the meal with a piece of Trinity's cornbread still on his plate, and he tapped his glass for quiet. "Family," he said, "I have been to 100 homecomings across this district. I have rarely been fed like I have been fed today. Whoever runs this kitchen runs it like somebody who understands that feeding people is a ministry, not a menu. I would like that person to stand up and be recognized." And the whole hall went quiet and looked around, because most of them still did not know what had happened downstairs. And I was back in the kitchen doorway with my apron on and flour on my hands, where I have always been, and I never stepped forward, because that is not my place. I do the work, and the work is enough. But Simone stood up. My daughter-in-law stood up in front of the superintendent and 400 people, and her voice shook, and she said, "It's my mother-in-law. Mother Loretta Bishop. She has run this kitchen for 31 years, and I tried to replace her, and I was a fool, and she saved this dinner today after I had already thrown her out of it. Please, everybody. That woman right there." And she pointed at me in the doorway. And 400 people turned around and stood up and clapped for a 66-year-old woman in a flour-dusted apron, and I will tell you true, I did not know what to do with my hands. I have never in my life been stood up for by a whole room. I have fed that room 10,000 times and never once been seen doing it. And now here they all were on their feet. And there was the superintendent clapping, and there was Deacon Frank with tears just running down his old face, and there was my son Andre clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Finally standing up for his mama, even if it was only with his 2 hands. I just nodded. I nodded once, that same single nod my mother gave me across that same hall when I was 17. And I went back to plating, because there were still people to feed, and that work is never done, and it is the whole point. That is the closest thing to a reversal there ever was. No document, no lawyer, no card played, no will read, no deed changing hands, just a room full of people, on their feet, finally seeing the wall that had been holding up their roof the whole time. I will confess, I very nearly did not go that morning. I sat in my car in the lot a good 10 minutes, and a hard little voice said, "Why are you even here? Why put on a costume for people who threw you out?" And a softer voice, my grandmother's, said, "You are here because these are your people, and this is your house, sash or no sash. And a wall does not choose the day it holds. So I got out of the car. And thank God I did. Now let me give you the honest accounting, the good and the humbling both. The dinner was saved. 400 people, plus the superintendent and the representative and the newspaper, all fed hot, and nobody in that hall ever fully knew how close it came to ruin, which is exactly how the kitchen has always liked it. 2 Sundays after homecoming, the committee met, and without my asking and without a single vote against, they put it in the record that the church kitchen would be run, from that day forward, by Mother Loretta Bishop, and no outside decision about that kitchen would be made without her. And they took the little laminated card with my name on the kitchen duty board, the one somebody had quietly peeled off back in the fall, and put it back up top, where it had been for 31 years. My name back on the board. A piece of laminated paper. I stood in front of that board by myself one evening after choir rehearsal, reading my own name up there, and I won't pretend the water did not come up behind my eyes. I let it. Some tears you have earned. Trinity is mine now. That is the sweetest itemized thing of all. Her mother agreed, and that girl is my apprentice, official. So you gonna teach me everything? She asked me the first day. The whole thing? All of it? Every last bit, I told her. The hams and the breaker, and how to keep Miss Cordelia and Deaconess Mavis from ever having to speak to one another. All the things nobody ever wrote down. Are you going to write it down now? For me? I'm going to put it in you first, I said, same as my mother put it in me. And then, baby, when it's already living in your hands, we'll write some of it down together. So you've got it both ways. So it can never be lost and never be voted out. She stands at my elbow now at every supper, every repast, every homecoming. It will not die with me. When the Lord calls me home, that knowledge will still be standing at that stove, in a young woman's hands, feeding people I will never meet. That is not a hobby. That is a wall being handed down. And Miss Prentice, the caterer, sent me a card, handwritten. I keep it in my Bible. It said, Mother Bishop, in 15 years I have never once seen a kitchen saved like you saved yours. I learned more standing beside you for 45 minutes than in all my training. I am sorry I walked into a house I did not understand. If you would ever let me come and cook beside you, just to learn the old ways, it would be an honor. And I called her and I told her, Sugar, the door's open. Come any time. Bring your little torch. And I'll show you that breaker. There is no revenge in me toward that woman. She was never my enemy. She was a stranger handed a load she could not have known how to carry. Now, Simone, I told you I would tell you the truth about my own heart, and here is the last of it. Simone and I are all right. But all right took some doing, and it took a boundary, and I mean to be straight with you about the boundary, because forgiveness is not the same thing as pretending a wound never happened. She came to my house the week after homecoming. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I taught Trinity the cornbread, and my son Andre sat beside her, and for once in his life my boy did not study the backs of his own hands. Mama, Andre said, I should have stood up for you. In that meeting, and every day after. I watched them put a sash on you and I said nothing because I did not want the trouble. That was a coward silence, and I am ashamed of it. I let my son sit in that a minute because a man needs to feel the weight of a thing before he can set it down. Then I got up and put his head against me like I did when he was small. You're forgiven, baby. You're my child. There is nothing you could do I would not forgive. But hear me, because I don't want you carrying this wrong. I did not need you to fight my battle. I have never once in my life needed a man to fight my battle, and you know that. Then what did you need? He asked. and he was near to tears. I needed my own son to stand up in a room and say, "That is my mother, and she matters, and I will not sit here quiet while she is made small." That's not fighting my battle, Andre. That is just telling the truth out loud. And a man who can't tell the truth out loud when it costs him something is going to spend his whole life watching good people get made small in rooms he's sitting right in. So you didn't fail me. You failed yourself. And I thank God you found it out young enough to fix it. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and I believe he did fix it, because he is a different man in a meeting now than he was, and I have watched him be it. And Simone cried at my table. "Mama, I don't even know how to say it," she said. "I have spent my whole life scared to death of being seen as small, of being the woman whose work doesn't count for anything. And I think I looked at you, and I saw the thing I was most afraid of becoming, and I tried to erase you to prove I wasn't you." She could barely get it out. "I'm so ashamed. Why were you afraid of becoming me?" I asked her, gentle. "Look at what I've got, Simone. That's just it," she said. And she was crying hard now. "I couldn't see what you had. I saw an apron and a stove and a bunch of church ladies, and I thought that meant nobody respected you. It took the whole thing burning down for me to see that this entire church leans on you, that you're the most respected woman in that building, and you never once asked anybody to notice. Now you're getting it," I said. "I'm getting it too late. No such thing as too late while everybody's still breathing." And that is about the most honest thing that proud girl has ever said in her life, and I honored it. "I forgive you," I told her, out loud plain, so she could hear every word of it. "Fully. You are my son's wife and my grandbaby's mother, and you are welcome at my table for as long as I have a table." And then I set the fence. "But hear me, Simone. You will not, ever again, make a decision about that kitchen, or about my place in that church, or about what I carry, without you sit down and ask me first. Not because I'm owed it. Because that is what respect looks like when it has got hands and feet on it. You understand me?" "Yes, ma'am," she said. And she has kept it. Forgiveness with a fence around it. That is the only kind that lasts. So there is the whole accounting. The dinner saved, my name back on the board, Trinity apprenticed, the caterer humbled and befriended, my son grown up a little, and my daughter-in-law returned to me inside a boundary we can both live behind. Nobody got destroyed. Nobody got dragged. No deed signed. No lawyer. No will read out. No card played. The reversal was the simplest thing in this world. What they threw away could not run without me, and the day came when the whole hall found it out at once. Now hear me plain a minute, because I did not tell you all this only about a church kitchen in Georgia. I told it for every woman whose steady, unshowy work has been mistaken for a hobby. The one who kept the family calendar in her head for 40 years so nobody ever missed a birthday or a medicine and got told she just likes to worry. The one who knew which neighbor to call and how to hold a whole street together and never once got thanked, because you do not thank a wall. You only notice it when it is gone. I see you. The Lord sees you. And there will come a homecoming Sunday in your life too, when the whole thing comes apart without you, and they have to cross the room and ask. When that day comes, do not gloat. Tie on your apron. Go do the quiet holy work you were always doing, and let your steadiness be the sermon. And before you decide anybody's quiet work is a hobby, go and find out what that work is actually holding up. Go and ask the old woman at the stove what it is she does. And then listen to her answer, because the day you tear out a wall to learn whether it was load-bearing is a very expensive day to learn it. Ask first. Honor the quiet ones first. Now before you go, do two things for me down in the comments, because I read them all, and I am sitting right here. First, tell me plain, has this ever been you? Have you been the wall somebody only noticed when it was gone? Maybe it was a job where you were the only one who really knew how the whole thing ran, and they let you go to save a little money, and then everything they did not know you were holding came crashing down behind you. Maybe it was a family, and you were the one who kept every thread tied. The appointments and the birthdays and the peace between people who would not speak, and nobody ever thanked you, because nobody ever saw it. Maybe it is happening to you right now, this very season, and you are wondering whether your quiet work counts for anything at all. It counts. I promise you, it counts. And the day is coming when they will find out just how much. Tell me your story, your town, your kitchen, whatever your kitchen happens to be. I read them, and I answer the ones I can, and I sit with all of them. And second, tell me honest, and this is the one I really want to know. If you had been Loretta standing in that vestibule, and the woman who called you, a home cook, was standing in front of you, begging you in public to come save it, would you have done what I did, and let it go without one word, and just gone down and quietly saved the dinner? Or would you have let her stand there and sweat a minute first, and made her feel every bit of what she put on you? There is no wrong answer, and I promise you I have felt both of those in my own chest. Tell me which one you are, down below, and tell me where in this world you are watching me from, and what time it is on your clock. I will be right here, reading. Save me a seat at your table.